everyone. Today we have our another new episode. This is our 1440 episode. We will discuss on negotiating the planet futures. We have our world famous speaker, uh, Mr. Rob Enderly from USA. Uh, we have Madam Ali Rice from UK. We have our friend Mr. Dev from USA, Dr. Tamanna from India, Mr. Ron from Solar Skyway, USA. He's very good friends of mine. And we have very special guest, Dr. Srini. But as we are planning to launching a center of excellence in South Asia, with the collaborations of Dr. Srini in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and all of the South Asian countries. First, I would like to give chance, Dr. Srini. Please introduce yourself and discuss about negotiating the planet futures and how we can make some progress with our Center of Excellence. Dr. Srini, please. Can you unmute, please?
As I said, a few of them, very good morning to all of you, and good evening to my India counterparts. I'm Dr. Srini here. I spent uh, 32 years in corporate. I was with SoftBank Corporation. I was heading the strategy and investments for Southeast Asia for SoftBank, which is primarily in the investment banking space. And prior to SoftBank, I spent a few years in the energy domain, primarily building solar plants, wind plants, and hybrid systems. Currently, I'm advising on the board, four companies in India. One is based out of Delhi, then one is based out of Bangalore, and couple of companies are based out of Hyderabad. So this is about my professional journey till date. From my from my academia perspective, I'm a postdoctorate in mechanical engineering from Delhi University, and I'm an IIM alumni, from Kozhikode, from the finance background, and I'm currently pursuing my law. So this is my qualification background. Now, thanks, Dr. Sharif. Good that I'm really happy, getting connected with you. You're a stalwart in this particular space. Even though the World Talent Economy Forum, which is quite new to me, but the kind of brief and the insights what you have given to me were quite encouraging. Having said, the topic also what you have picked up, exploring the climate diplomacy. It's a very interesting word, though. And then the international negotiations and how global leaders and communities work together to address the climate changes. Of course, this is a very big subject for us, climate. There are a lot of climate changes that we are witnessing across globe these days. I think in the recent past, the kind of floods, in different parts of the globe, whether you call US, they give every time a different name for every change, or every tufan which comes. Or in the recent Pakistan, what we have witnessed, there was a death toll which crossed more than 400 members. Again, typically in India, if we notice, the northeast part, the Himachal part, it is really in devastating state. There are a lot of cloud bursts which are happening. So primarily, if we try collate all these things together and see in toto, in principle, the need of the hour is what best that we could bring, the control systems, especially the control mechanisms, in order to even reduce, the global warming, or maybe the temperatures which are actually increasing from the, from the Arctic specifics, if we try to note. So how these temperatures can be minimized. So there are different platforms which have come up, and the global leaders have come together. Maybe the 2015 Paris Agreement, which has come, and even, my friend from the UN, for sure, from United Kingdom, they have a good, I would say, recently a couple of agreements which they have signed in the UN conference, especially in the UN conference unframework the UN framework convention on the climate changes, the UNFCCC. Typically, I think these platforms really come closure in terms of forming the policy, or if there are any changes which needs to be brought in into the policy framework, as well how the carbon content can be reduced, which is prevailing as a greenhouse gas emissions, how we can control on these aspects, in fact. So specifically talking to India, of course, US is now in the recent past, at least for the last half a decade, if we notice, we have seen the PJM or maybe a few other utilities have largely they are implementing RE projects. At least I have a very straightaway economics with me from SoftBank when we acquired a company called Intersect. So this company already had a very strong portfolio of 4.7 gigawatts of of projects to be deployed in different utilities on the Texas side as well as on the New York and the other area regions, in fact. And today, a remarkable progress has been demonstrated even in US, especially from SoftBank point of view, and also the top 100 companies, which include Google, Microsoft, all these companies which have already pledged on the on the on the carbon neutrality is the other interesting point, though. The significant investments have already gone in this particular space. The lot of cross-border processes or maybe negotiations and even agreements are taking place across the countries. And even interestingly, even if we see from the UK perspective also, I have come across a very interesting PPAs which talk about for a 6 years period or maybe for an 8 years period. That is very interesting, unlike in India where you have PPAs beyond 15 years, beyond 20 years, taking the project live for almost 15, 20 years kind of a thing. I think this short PPAs can really turn, the process much faster in terms of deployment of, the RE projects, the renewable projects. So the third important point, which I also wanted to, bring onto the table is the lot of policy advancements also which has happened, and not only on the generation space, even on the distribution space as well in the transmitting space also. We have witnessed a lot of improvements which have happened in the recent past. Now, specifically, if I talk about India, in fact, so in India we have if we see 2025 economics, we already crossed 240 gigawatts of installations primarily on the renewable energy space, whether you call it solar, whether you call it wind, or whether you call an hybrid system. I think the 24 by 7 concept, which has recently come up a few years back, 3 to 4 years back, well, there's a lot of discussions happened by different public sector companies of government undertaking, Indian government undertaking at the central policy level. So they were mulling very innovative concepts, how they could bring the technology which would really play a very significant role in this whole, I would say, in the whole ecosystem. So this is really bringing a lot of phenomenal changes, in our renewable energy space, especially. Not only this 240 gigawatts, our target is in the next 3 years, we would even cross very comfortably around 500 gigawatts of renewable energy installations from the India, as a country. The target is for 2030, but I think we should really go the kind of pace where we are in. We should certainly meet this target much early, at least a couple of years before. So that is one good part which we are trying to even witness. The battery energy storage is also really picking up much faster. There's a lot of technology interference is happening in this particular space. The AIML is dominating. So we see a huge opportunity. And having said what just few minutes back when Dr. Sharif was talking about, So we are trying to work on a concept where we could develop a kind of an ecosystem, a startup ecosystem, where you can have more entrepreneurs in this particular space, especially from a technology perspective, who can add a lot of value and contribute to this, to this climate change contributions. That is one thing what we are mulling very seriously in this particular space. How we need to build this platform with government collaborations. Of course, having said with all these good parts, still there are challenges, no doubt. India is still a very dynamic political system. It's a federal concept, no doubt. A democratic country. A lot of challenges we have. Still, a lot of policy intervention is required in certain areas, and a lot of pollution. Cities are still prevailing day by day. The pollution is also increasing as renewable is increasing. Pollution is increasing. There are different ways and mechanisms which the technology is also cutting across in terms of not only the renewable energy the implementation, but how we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions with the help of different technologies. So even this particular area is picking up much significant. For example, the biogas or maybe the concentrated biogas. So these projects are really popping up these days with some innovative technology coming in this area. So whatever the waste that we witness, so how we can effectively convert this into a raw material or into a fuel with the different chemical compositions and pigmentations, and see how we can really reduce the burning of these the waste, which again eventually pollutes that particular demography, if which we have already witnessing, in fact. So these are some of the actions which are in pipeline, and things are really moving in this direction, but much more to come. It is too early to really claim that we have really reduced from this percentage to this percentage significantly, but we are in the right track. That is what I would like to at least say as one of the concluding tagline. Maybe I'll pause myself here.
Mhm.
I would
Thank
even
you.
allow the other panel members to also a little bit they should also. I want to hear from them also. Let me pause
Thank you.
myself. Over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Dr. Srini. This is very excellent discussions. I'm from Bangladesh, so I think the South Asian alignment is very important for us. And I know that you are also expert of water. Water diplomacy is another important aspect for us. So we will discuss later. Mr. Rob Endaldi, my next question for you, because we have our other speakers, definitely for the startup ecosystem, we are working with Tando and iBeyond. It's one of the fantastic corporations from Silicon Valleys. Mr. Rob Endley, how can countries balance national interests with the urgent need for the global climate actions? What's your thoughts? How we can develop better strategy and how we can make alignment with USA and North America?
Well, I'm not sure you want to make a terrible alignment with the U.S. right now. We're kind of screwing this whole thing up at the moment. But the one of the big problems we've had with regard to moving forward on reducing waste and increasing problems associated with global warming, and I will use the term global warming because it's really the trend that most of us are watching, not just climate change. And it's funny that we got to climate change because too many folks on the other side kept arguing, well, there's climate change, it's winter, it's summer, it gets hot, it gets cold. Well, why is anything any different? So we're now to climate change as opposed to global warming, and wordsmithing stuff isn't going to fix anything. So we go back to at the core of the problem, and I think the core of the problem, at least in terms of fixing it, is about blame and payment. For a lot of folks that want to fight this, they believe very strongly in removing the subsidies to the petrochemical industry and perhaps charging them to clean up the mess that they've created, which in a perfect world would be the way you'd approach it. The problem is the petrochemical industry, and by the way, I would throw in cattle in here. Large-scale cattle is also a big contributor to the underlying problem with methane gas. So you stop using gas, stop eating beef, put these industries in distress, and of course these industries have resources and they have lobbyists, and they have a significant amount of influence on the government, and so the end result is not only can they create false messaging that is very powerful, that argues whether or not we're doing something that even makes sense. Climate change is either not real, or who cares? It's going to happen 100 or 200 years out, and everybody's going to be dead. So why bother about it now? Those kinds of messages are counterproductive, and so the result is our path to success has to have these parties on our side, or at least neutral, as opposed to having to force and overcome them, because they've simply made them too powerful. Petrochemical industry alone, with massive subsidies, is one of the massive powers in the United States, and has been in the past. Shell Oil had to be broken up because it was effectively running the government back in the 1930s. And while it's less powerful now than it was back then, it still has a significant amount of influence. And so to make this transition, to get everybody on the same page and work it forward, we've got to stop these wordsmithing efforts, stop these efforts to kind of backdoor it. I mean, moving to electric vehicles certainly was an interesting way to move, but that was going to deprive the petrochemical industry of income, and thus they were going to fight the overall move and try to convince folks. I mean, I'm reading an article this morning about how it's a false article about how electric cars are putting out more pollutants than gas cars are now, with a different kind of pollutant. It's kind of bizarre. It came out of seeking alpha. So these counter messages, these false dialectics, if you will, are just creating a massive problem in terms of being able to execute. And so getting these misinformation sources to work for us, rather than us trying to backdoor them or overwhelm them. They're not stupid. They recognize that what we're doing is not in their best interest, and they're going to fight the underlying change to the great detriment of the nation. So what I'm going to argue here, back to the question, is the critical path for any nation includes addressing climate change, particularly in the developing nations, where they're being hit very hard by a loss of agriculture. Arable land is starting to fail. Degradation of resources, degradation of clean water. I remember talking to Bill Gates a few years back about his pivot, and one part of it was his realization that you can't sell technology to an emerging nation if they can't get medicine, clean water, and food. It's going to be back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're on that first floor, that first level, you're not going to be able to convince them to do much else. And so you have to fix those problems first before you get people on board to buy your stuff. And the same thing with the nation. If your nation's suffering through drought, it's suffering through pollution, it's suffering through climate-oriented destabilization, then fixing those underlying problems has to become a priority, or you lose the nation. I mean, it's a critical path for survival for these countries. But I would argue, even for the developed world, you have a certain number of people that are dying every year, and you cross a certain threshold, you're going to be in trouble, even if you're a developed nation. And there are parts of my country that are currently in flames right now, not too far away from where I am suddenly, which kind of drives the underlying point home that we all live on this planet, and we have to protect and preserve it. And for each nation, that needs to be our predominant goal, but less about tricking people into thinking thinking the government's making progress, or trying to backdoor some of these powerful players. We need to get everybody on board, and whatever that takes. If it means transitioning the subsidy for petrochemical to a subsidy for transition, to get them to move to a cleaner fuel source, to get them involved in electrical distribution, get them involved in electrical storage. I believe Shell is one of the companies that's actually working on energy storage at the moment. But helping them along that path to transition their business model into something that is just more beneficial for the world and the nation at large would be a critical first path to making this happen. And that means the governments have to change their priorities and just make this a much higher priority than it currently is, because it's not going to go away. And we're at a tipping point right now. And if we can't pass the tipping point, then mitigation, then correction won't be the path. It'll simply be mitigation, and we'll be looking at living underground or something like that, which could be problematic for anyone. So that's my opening remarks with regard to that question.
Thank you, Madam Alirais. What's your opening remarks based on these questions?
Okay.
Are the need for global climate actions?
Because when I was researching it, actually, the US has always been kind of a global leader and pushing forward kind of climate change and solutions. But I think since Trump's come in, he's reversed a lot of the policies, and he's lifted the protection on the environment, And I think the thing is that it feels like everything's going backwards when we should be moving forward. So I think that the worrying thing is that if the US backtracks, then it means that other superpowers that aren't necessarily as kind of dedicated to make change that we need to make will also probably follow suit. So and for me, I was talking to Alaska earlier, and I didn't realize that there's 3 climate clocks in the world, and they're in Seoul, Glasgow, and New York. And apparently we've got 4 years and 366 days before it's irreversible. So essentially time does matter, and the way we do things, as far as I'm concerned, need to be sustainable and kind of planet people friendly, you know. So essentially, and obviously we're all integrated in the process to change things. So, you know, we're all part of the problem, and potentially we're all part of the solution as well. So essentially, and I think that the only way that we can do that is to kind of create radical change and do things differently. And I don't, you know, so we had an electric car a few years ago, and I don't think electric cars, although they seem like a good idea, are necessarily the answer. And one, there's the infrastructure's not there, even in a relatively small country like the UK. And 2, I think, you know, that once their batteries have gone, they cause a pollution problem, and it's really hard to recycle or get rid of any of the kind of toxins and horrible things that are in the batteries. So I think, and it's also as well, when I was talking to Alaska, I think the government, you know, the fact that Trump wants to, I think apparently one of Trump's campaign slogans is "Drill, baby, drill," and essentially, I think there's 23 million acres of Alaska that is pristine wilderness that he's planning to drill. So I think the thing is, it's not, you know, it's not a good way to go at all. And for me, you know, I worked in California for 10 years, and the most breathtaking, amazing thing about it is just the landscape and the natural beauty that's just huge and awesome. And essentially, you know, from a little country like the UK, you just don't see wilderness and mountains and trees that are that big and that awesome. So I think the thing is that from my point of view, I think it's every country has its own problems, and essentially it's always going to start from its own kind of view and perspective. But definitely in the UK, I think we almost get 50% of our fuel now to heat our houses from sustainable sources, either wind or solar. So essentially, we've made quite a radical change, and it obviously costs less. And since the war with Russia as well, you know, that's affected how much power. So we've had to change our power supply and the way that we do things anyway. So essentially, it probably goes back to best practice and kind of solutions that, you know, that are planet kind, really. And essentially the way forward is to probably kind of keep finding alternatives. So yeah, so I think there's massive room for improvement, but we need to make change that's more urgent than thinking we've got all the time in the world, because we haven't.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith. You are from iBeyond, and in climate negotiation, what mechanism ensure that vulnerable nations receive fair support and adaptation resources? What's your thought?
Well, Dr. Sharif, thank you for letting me be part of that. And this question, the prior one, kind of fit together, because as we look at climate, as we've talked in the past, climate is a subject that is global by nature. It doesn't stop at the country's borders. So we have to look at a collaborative approach. We have to look at a way where we combine our group intelligence, our resources, and others to accomplish this. We've seen in the past that as you look, that a nation or two that do not prescribe to helping address this problem means you're not going to have a complete solution. And sometimes it will just get worse as you go forward. So it has to be tackled on a collaborative global nature. Having said that, you know, if I am looking at the most vulnerable nations in there, you need to really look at multiple views, particularly when you have the concept of the least developed countries and the small island developing states, because you need their capabilities and their resources are going to be very difficult on this because they do not have the economic base, they do not have the educational base, they do not have the financial base and the education for their citizens to really do this. So you have to, as you see with those comments, do multiple things. You have to begin to look at how to put in ways to finance this type of things. There, in part of the Cato Protocol, there was an adaptive fund to developed under the Paris Agreement that will give developing nations some of their funding, some of their ownership of the projects that are being taken, will provide them local input into it. You have many other funds, such as the Green Climate Fund and others, resources beginning to go there. But really, when you get down to it, there's a couple things that are there. One of them is the people within these countries, the government, the academia, the citizens, the companies. They all need to be educated in what's at stake, what's the science behind it, what is the impact of their actions or inactions that can be done with it. They've got to look at how you begin to get this society, the communities, and the governments to begin to shape the efforts. Because as they come together to shape the efforts, and you have that critical mass in that ecosystem, funding becomes easier to get because you can show the elements there. You know, there is government funding, there's NGO funding, there's funding from high net worth individuals and groups that are critical. And just like in many things, to look at a diversity of funding, particularly for these vulnerable nations, is really one of the elements they should happen there. Because there's many international agreements in place, but one of the challenge you see there is that oftentimes the small nations, the vulnerable nations, do not have the infrastructure, not just the physical infrastructure, but the financial, the government infrastructure to be able to effectively manage those. So part of the answer to this, Dr. Sharif, is you have to build institutional capabilities in these nations. You have to strengthen the institutions so that they can properly manage, deploy, monitor, improve their fiscal, improve their regulatory systems, put in place businesses that are more climate friendly or modify the ones that are there, put education, particularly advanced academic programs in place to be targeted towards their local individual needs. And finally, like so many of the issues, it's an education process. And we need to remember we're in a time of lifelong learning, but particularly when I look at things like climate change, as Rob says, global warming, wherever you want to call it. And I kind of agree with Rob on calling it climate change, is that you have to educate everyone to understand it. And you have to act once again globally, and you can no longer act locally to have an effect on this issue. So Dr. Sharif, thank you.
Thank you. Professor Ron from Solar Skyway, I learned a lot from his lab in Silicon Valley. Mr. Ron, you have all of the expertise for green technologies. So what role should emerging technologies like AI and renewable energy play in shaping international climate agreement? What's your thought? How your Solar Skyway can be helpful for South Asia? Can you unmute, please?
There we go. Thank you. I appreciate your inviting me to this forum, and I look forward to further communication around this critical question of how we can negotiate our future I'd like to start by saying that over 50 years ago, I was very fortunate to be a part of a program where the question of the impact of technology on society was brought forward. It was at San Jose State. It was called Cybernetic Systems and the course Cybernation and Man. And in this context, we raised the question, what are the various technologies that are going to impact our future? And having the perspective of many years, I've come to realize from my own personal perspective, while we're so concerned and there's a lot of current concern about artificial intelligence. In fact, we dealt with that subject back that long ago. And I can say that the thing that I see having impacted our world more than all of the elements of electronics and software and computer systems and so forth. Here, I live in Silicon Valley, so I would presumably be one to know. But I think that this simple machine we call the automobile has had more damaging effect on the planet than anything else that we might have dreamed of. And it was mentioned just a few minutes ago by Ali Rice that there's some doubts about the electric car. And I recently took a look again after having seen it many years ago at the advertisement from Uber. And they took a bunch of cardboard boxes, there we go, and put these cardboard boxes in a city. And at the end of it all, the city was stacked full of cars. Now let's say we want to solve the transportation problem. So what we do is we produce one more box, and this box takes up an area of 2 meters by 4 meters, 6 meters on the street. Every single one of those boxes has 3 places to be put, at least maybe 4 or 5. There's your garage, there's the street outside of your house where there's room for a couple of cars. There's one where you go to the grocery store. There's one where you go to work. So the urban space, on the premise of making more machines for each individual to own, is beyond absurd. It ad absurdum, what you find is that the city is stacked, just like in this short but compelling advertisement from Uber, that when it's all said and done, this is not a way forward. So what my team here at San Jose State and working with colleagues around the world, and particularly getting liftoff in India at this time, is to have an elevated transportation system where every vehicle, instead of being used once and stacked up for the day in a big warehouse, stacked many high, instead of that, we have a car that you take and you borrow it long enough to make a trip across town. And then from there, you leave that vehicle behind. And just for a simple calculation, let's say that vehicle provides 50 trips a day. Well, if the cost of the vehicle is $100,000 divided by 50, you're making your way across town in a vehicle that only costs society and you combined $2,000. So the economics of this are compelling beyond anything we've imagined up until now. And the big question people raise is, if we're going to have small vehicles, how can they possibly provide the capacity? Well, it turns out that capacity of a train system or anything of that nature, you have vehicles that are a mile apart, a kilometer apart, and all of that space between trains is not being used. So we can fill that space up. Long story short, And then, of course, by using solar power, that ultimately brings us to a viable system. Now, to put this in the broader context, if I'm negotiating with you all and I am a player in this drama of the planet's future, then I want to claim some of those resources for this initiative. And where that resource comes from is the basic principle of doing more with less. If I can get a 50 to 1 multiple on the amount of material it takes to make one of those boxes simply by sharing that box with 50 people instead of putting it in my garage for my use only, then we've made a great step forward. And in that context, it's also extremely important to recognize that the other aspects of our future having to do with topics that have been touched upon here, oil, solar systems, cattle, all those other elements have to be brought into play. And I would make the case that the one subject I haven't heard really touched upon so far in our session here today is the impact that all of this is having on the oceans. And I think that if I had time to spare, and if any of you have time to spare, the fragile state of the ocean, even though it's immense, and we think that we can dilute our pollution by putting it out in the ocean, it turns out that because of the oil industry and our exploitation of those resources from below the ground, they do not mix in the ocean fully. They simply are relegated to a top micro layer, and that is at the source, the origin of the food chain. So the most critical thing I see in negotiating a viable future for our planet is to absolutely stop the floating pollution, whether it's plastics or toxic chemicals on the surface of the ocean, a very thin layer that is being compromised and leading to such things as you see in the Mediterranean Sea this summer, where the temperatures have gone off the charts and leaving people in a very challenging bid for the future.
Thank you. Mr. Dev, what's your thought on what role should emerging technologies like AI and renewable energy play in shaping international climate agreements? Can you unmute, please? Mr. Dev, I cannot hear you. Mr. Dev, I cannot hear you. Sorry, I think you can join again. I think there is some problem with your microphone. Okay. Dr. Tamanna, what you want to add for today's discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I just wanted to say that, as there's a difference between developing world and the developed world. Now, developing, after the industrial revolution, there was a lot of pollution which has been since the time industrial revolution has taken place. Pollution has been increasing, and global warming is a major challenge which the world is facing. But due to the pressure of civil society, most of the and lot of pressure from the people across the world, most of the developed countries have a system whereby there is less of pollution in their own countries, but probably that kind of a system has led to problem in this, for example, in South Asia. Now, the first question which I really liked about your show is, Dr. Sharif, was about national security and climate change. Now, as far as India is concerned, now see, for example, in wars, you use nuclear technology, etc. So that's like these things are major challenge because the government can't do much about all these things because national security is majorly important. But we have to, worldwide reach a consensus whereby we do not, we do not have we don't crush our climate and have a system which is more uh, climate worthy. So I guess that is extremely important right now. And so what we need to do is, I mean, India is working on the system. We have, the government has launched the system of dustbins being, of plastics and the normal dust and thing. So I guess, I mean, national security, for example, during the 1940s when, we had the atomic bomb. So that was a major system. Now we see in the Ukraine war, how much of pollution must be there. I mean, it has to be seen, actually in Gaza and uh, uh, Israel war and the in Ukraine and Russian war. So these things have to be we have to be very particular about that. National security is important, but how the world can come together to have a system which is more uh, climate friendly. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Srini, you are in policy development, and a lot of interesting idea and issues come from today's discussions. Especially we are observing in Pakistan, in India, in Nepal. I think Bangladesh also have flood-related problem. Many people died. So for that particular issues, do you have any special thoughts, or do you have any special issues or strategy, technology for South Asia or for our center of excellence?
Yeah, on the center of excellence, which I would say collating all these natural disasters which are happening across our region, especially, let's, even if we take our region, India and the SAARC countries per se, there's a lot of devastating status today. And of course, policy intervention has really gone much far better in terms of easing out certain things. Maybe the industry revolution which is happening, especially in the northeast areas, is one major point which is really killing the concept. I think that is where we need to really focus and see. We are also trying to give some white papers, presenting to the government. That is one area. But on the other side, the center of excellence, which what we are mulling currently is to set up at least with one state province, wherein to start off with and get all these, I would say, the pieces into it, like how we can control in a holistic view or in a complete, in toto. So we would like to bring the industry experts, we would like to bring the scientists onto one platform, we would like to bring the global mentors onto one platform, to also parallelly have the ecosystem encourage the young talent on the one side, and get the entrepreneur culture to introduce a lot of cutting edge technologies into this, because I'm very confident that AI ML can really play a very important, or maybe a significant role, as even Ron was talking about automobile. At least 23% of the population, at least I would say the pollution, rather 23% of the pollution in India comes from the automotive space. Again, my another friend Rob, which he was highlighting about the residential sector, the awareness programs. I think the center of excellence can really play a significant role in mitigating all these sections independently, if we see vertical wise. And also we can bring the provinces together, because for sure we need to have the the government interventions here, because they play a major role in getting the policy frameworks accommodative or more lucrative to the current system which we are trying to bring in. We are in the process. We already negotiated with at least with the local province where I live, in a city called Hyderabad. This is in the south part of India. So the state province of this region, we have already worked out a platform with them, and Dr. Sharif, along with you and the other members of this team in this panel and few more experts in this thing, maybe we'll just try work out a blueprint, and maybe in the next meeting we could also little bit share the draft blueprint to all of you, and also take some feedback from you, from the experts on the panel, and see how we can fine tune, maybe work towards this. At least I'm confident that maybe not tomorrow, but in the next half a decade, or at least in a decade, we could certainly bring a lot of changes. That is one thing. Last but not the least, we are also working on the water management, which is one of the essential piece in the whole ecosystem, because water also comes or becomes a part of the renewable energy indeed. And today globally we see there are a lot of scarcity in terms of water. There are a lot of floods, but there's a lot of water which is getting wasted, even though there are a lot of dams to store, but it is still not sufficient. On the other side, we have come across a company where I'm advising the company on their board as a strategic advisor to them. So they have brought a patented technology in this, where they are producing water from air. It's an atmospheric.
Narrow.
You're right. It's an atmospheric water generators with a cold chamber technology, which is completely patented by them. It's doing good. They got a good funding from the DP World also, which is one of the largest funding space house today, and they're pretty doing very good in this particular space. They have different capacities of water generators which can produce maybe a 5,000 liters per day, or maybe 10,000 liters per day. So it's just a multiples, to set up the bottling plants. It's more than the bottled water what we purchase today from the market. So if we just try make a comparison, it hardly falls, like 1 liter of bottle comes to probably around some 50 cents or 55 cents, which is pretty, I would say, a good deal to really look this as an opportunity indeed. So they have done a lot of installations in the Middle East, in Orlando, then in few locations of Texas and all. So maybe I'll send some links. My US friends can actually go witness it if you're closer by, or maybe passing through that region indeed. So what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to promote a specific company here, but I'm just trying to bring all these things together and see if we can create a good center of excellence platform, which can be a good, I would say, a center of excellence, like an attractive point where we have all the global leaders participating and contributing to the climate change, or whatever the definition, or whatever the I would say the abbreviation, or maybe an acronym that we give to it. End of the day, how we can effectively reduce the carbon content. So that's the whole logic. I'll again pause.
Yeah, thank you. I have another question for you. Example, let's say my friend Ron also work with climate foundations, and because of this Himalaya has a lot of carbon effect, and that's why there are a lot of disaster happening. That's why this Kashmir, Nepal's, it has flood and all of the things. I think the Chittagong area in Bangladesh, it will affect by the flood. Secondly, we are observing inside India, last 100 of years, India developed a lot of barrages, right? These Ganga barrages and all of the things. Example, also Bangladesh affected by this Podda area for these barrages and all of the things. And in South Asia, we have major problem with water, drinking water. India will affected by 40% populations. They do not have drinking water. Bangladesh also has the same issues. Bay of Bengal's ecosystem we have to build. Sundarban, this is our area where we can focus on developing natural ecosystem. What's your thoughts about this drinking water? Beside this Arrow or this technology, or we have lot of river inside South Asia, inside Bangladesh, India, So how we can cooperate each other, how we can negotiate each other, how we can help each other. It's very complex situation right now.
Yeah, let me be very candid here. This is a broader subject, to really look at. There's a lot of geopolitical situations which are tied up to this kind of scenarios. For sure, there are alternative technologies which are available to really mitigate the issue what you're really trying to highlight. But how we can effectively mitigate these things? See, at least the need of the hour is, we someone has to address these issues and concerns and present this in appropriate forums where you have the SARC meetings happening or some of these G7. There are a lot of these days. A lot of Gs. The G meetings which are available, the different platforms. So how we can address this, or maybe in the World Economic Forum, how we can address this kind of issues. For sure, we have some good technologies in place. We can actually bring all these things on white paper. And maybe one way is to see is how we can, in our center of excellence, how we can get these and maybe create this as a platform reaching to various stakeholders in the whole process who can actually come out with solutions, because at the end of the day we need solutions which are
Exactly.
implementable in
Yeah.
in the geopolitical conditions. So we need to really bring something on these lines, work on these lines, get all these technology frameworks into one area. So per se, today maybe if you have a very specific zone like maybe an island which requires maybe a 500,000 liters, I have a technology solution for them. Today it might be a little bit expensive, but it is a capex for them. But for the next 20 years, the water is almost, there's a break even maybe after 6th year or the 7th year, and the rest of the 15 years is almost free of cost for them, in terms of the water consumption. So we need to work on these strategies, Dr. Sharif. So I think COE can become a good platform, and maybe we can start building a lot of, we can put pieces together and see how we can evolve this in the right way, and then, represent the various stakeholders in the process.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for your response.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Madam Ali Rice. How can negotiators address conflict between economic growth and environmental sustainability? What Dr. Srini already discussed about this negotiation issues. Definitely, World Talent Economic Forum compared to other forum, it's very small, but we are growing. We focus on quality, and we have all of the intellectual ability from around the world and intellectual people who has right kind of solutions and negotiation ability. But what's your thought? How we can improve in this area, Madam Ali Rice?
Yeah, well, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. No, as one of the things actually when I was just hearing the previous speaker speak actually is I think one of the things that we do, because my brother-in-law is in the petrochemical industry, and he sets up plants around the world. So they've lived expatriately for 24 years, where every time he's set up a plant or project managed. And I think one of the documentaries that was really telling to me is there's a woman that's a presenter here called Stacey Dooley, and she was talking about the cotton industry and how we as Westerners set up plants abroad that don't have the same health, safety, and even environmental restrictions and regulations. And essentially, what you'd think, as an English woman, I'd think buying cotton would be a really good environmentally, conscious choice. But essentially, I think it's they've actually destroyed a sea, and the water source that the locals use to wash and clean their clothes and drink is actually is really toxic, because they've released all kinds of toxins and heavy metals into the water source that everyone relies on. And essentially what was a big sea is now reduced to nothing. And essentially, I think the Western world need to be responsible for what we do. And that, the person that comes down to is our, the guy that's in charge of the environment in the UK. but overseas, because and obviously when they go overseas, that that they provide jobs for people that are like, so it provides a livelihood. But I still think that there's an ethical, moral kind of question mark over what they do, because essentially they operate in a different way because they don't have the same regulations to adhere to. And essentially I think it's the same as I know it's quite controversial, but I think kind of producing GM crops, so I think it was Monsanto that produced GM crops for Africans. But essentially, from my point of view, if you produce anything and you're not willing to feed it to your own children, you shouldn't be producing it. So essentially, there's a really ethical, moral stance that I always take. And essentially, I think that's what, so everyone should do. So there's a cooperative, but there shouldn't be, lesser standards just because you're in a different place. And I fully understand that the infrastructures, when I worked and lived in Malaysia, that the infrastructure wasn't there even to deal with the waste. I suppose people would carry plastic bags and use straws to drink their drinks, and then they'd throw them on the floor because there weren't necessarily bins there, and there was so many pieces of plastic bags that were just going into the ocean or littering the beach. So essentially, and the thing is that one of my friends that made a massive impact on me was a friend that I met when I worked in the States, and she was middle class and she was from Nairobi, but she was really bemused that when she came to the US that there were animal rights, because in her country there still weren't human rights. So essentially, that there is a massive different perspective. And the thing is that we aren't in survival mode in the Western world. And in other countries that are still developing, some people truly are. So essentially, you can't. That's the thing, is you can't put the same onus on everyone because everyone's in a different situation. But I think the thing is that there has to be a moral compass whenever people do anything. So that's my first thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Rob Enderle. What your response on this question? How can negotiator address conflict between economic growth, environment, and stabilities? I think already you respond, but if you have any response based on this, Dr. Srini's approach, like how we can negotiate with all of the things and develop World Talent Economic Forum for this kind of conflict resolutions.
Well, I'm actually a trained negotiator. Whenever you're starting off with a negotiation, you're looking for common ground. And you're also trying to address the fact that in a negotiated settlement of any kind, both sides are likely to be somewhat unhappy. You're trying to meet someplace in the middle and then move from there. In the case of climate change, however, I'm not sure someplace in the middle is going to be appropriate, which is the underlying issue, is that you're trying to reach a goal. Let's say you're trying to reach a goal where you're trying to save a bunch of lives, which we are in this particular case. Are you willing to negotiate off some percentage of those lives in order to accomplish the broader goal? And I worry that not only won't we be able to do that, but whether we should be able to do that. The underlying concept of trading lives for basically economics, which is what we're talking about here. The folks that are pro correcting the climate abnormalities are for the most part focused on trying to save lives and the planet. But clearly there are some private industries that benefit as well. But for the most part, the goal is longer life for the planet and the species. Those that are fighting the climate change things are doing so for economics. We need to preserve the status quo because that's how we make our living. Trying to set a baseline between those two groups is going to be really difficult because the premise that each has is so vastly different. However, I should point out it's probably easier to address the economic side than it is to address the life sides, because we can't bring people back to life. That we can provide economic subsidies to overcome the negative economics of the transition. And that's perhaps where we go back into the political side of this and say, well, maybe what we start the negotiation is we make sure we've got things on the table that we can provide that can address the economic problems that the folks that want to stop this need addressed. And so part of this is stepping back and saying, okay, maybe we can't, maybe in terms of regular negotiation, maybe we can't trade lives for economics, but we can trade dollars for lives. In other words, put in more money to preserve more people. And so changing the nature of the negotiation to address the ground where the economic side lives may be the best path forward. Because I don't see any movement, nor do I expect there should be any movement on the saving lives, preserving the planet side. That's just something you got to do. If you don't do it, you're dead. On the other hand, shifting economic focus from some projects to other projects in order to appease the folks that are fighting the process would seem to be the far easier path. So that's how I would approach it anyway. In terms of common ground, I'd look at the two sides. I'd say, okay, who can budge and who can't? I think the economic side can be made to budge much more easily than the life-saving side. By the way, if you want to focus on the life-saving sides, that you can throw technology at it as a way, but it's not going to have an economic core. I mean, you're going to spend money regardless of how you're going to solve these underlying problems. And as long as the money is focused on trying to get the outcome that you want, both sides want. I mean, you have to argue the petrochemical industry wants to survive as well. So both sides have survival in as a core goal, and that probably sets the foundation for the basis that you'd use to structure the negotiation, perhaps carry it forward. That's my thought.
Thank you. Mr. Shankar, what's your thought about Center of Excellence?
Pardon me?
How we can, what's your thought about Center of Excellence, what we are launching today?
Yes, that's what the WTEF Center of Excellence in Hyderabad with Dr. Srini is what we are looking at, because the Center of Excellence needs to be at a place where we are looking at corporate innovations. And with regards to corporate innovations, what I understand is we have reached a place in India where innovations are all over the place with startups. At the same time, we are looking at how that could be aligned to the sustainable goals, the ESGs, and how a certain level of cooperation can integrate the cutting edge technology wraps, the AI, as in how the Western world, the global North, is worked out from the university industry partnerships. And this is where we are looking at the corporate, the COE can actually play a role to ignite and spark off things from where we are today as a corporate and integrate with new startups, bringing in a university industry partnership with under the guidance of World Talent Economic Forum and the many stalwarts and the thought leaders there, and bringing it all together as a tri-sector partnership with the government, the private sector, and the academia. So having said that, what I also see is that the most important thing about this corporate, the COE, is the shift in the mindset. You know, the thinking that has gotten us to where we are today is insufficient to go beyond it, and for which we need to collaborate, and we need to bring seemingly opposite worlds of technology and culture, because while technology gives us wings, the culture will give us roots. So all the things that we are integrating through India is to bring the age-old wisdom and turn that into not just return on investment, but actually create a new economic model where definitely the profits, but actually the impact, the cultural impact, and how humans can exist and coexist in a more harmonious way to bring about change that can actually bring in something from the global south into the global north, and recognizing the power of the innovations based on the human spirit, the new talent that is emerging out of India. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Today we launch our Center of Excellence and we share our framework. Mr. David Smith, my next question for you: how should corporation and investor be included in negotiating the planet future, and what responsibilities should they bear? What's your thought? Can you unmute, please?
Dr. Sharif, you know, that is an area where we've talked about it even in our prior answers here with you. We're in an environment today where corporations, investors, governments, academia have to act arm in arm to be effective today. And you have to begin to put that in the context of what we've heard previously today, in that you have to understand that in some instances, the whereabouts of the different organizations are very different. As Rob answered in negotiation answer, sometimes those are really hard to do. So, for example, corporations, they need to be included as a key non-state actor. They have clearly roles as observers, as participants in international climate change. And but on the other hand, they're going to be more of an observer if you look at or about in the UN COP meetings. They can participate, but they really don't have a vote when you get to the decisions there. So you see that type of role. But what can happen in those is the coming together of those stakeholders in this Technopolis view can implement really public-private partnerships. And that's really essential for funding, for scaling green technologies, for mobilizing the action that's required. So for the corporations and investors, they need to have some transparency. Particularly corporations, they need to disclose climate-related risk. They need to look at their supply chains, because oftentimes the supply chains are some of the greatest contributors to this type of environmental action. Companies can commit to net zero goals, but they need to be measurable. They need to look at the elements that can be put in place around them. Investors, though, particularly since in many instances, they're not tied to public companies and that type of investor side, they have the ability for some financial leadership. They can help align portfolios with low carbon pathways. They can look at areas like that. And that one of the biggest challenges I see when you look at corporations and investors is some of the more extreme approaches to addressing climate change go against the tenets of the corporations and the investors in providing a return to their shareholders. So you have to really understand that there's this need for very innovative solutions, because firms are expected to invest in, deploy green technologies, energy efficiency, but then you have this circular economic business model, which is really one of the tensions that must be navigated in it. And the ability to put together, Dr. Sharif, like you're doing, a platform that can be shared, a platform that can work across these various systems of systems. You've heard me speak many times that we're in a world dominated by system of systems. If I look at the climate industry, the climate future for our planet, it is really a extremely complex systems of systems approach, and we have to address solutions understanding it as a system of system, in building platforms that cross these barriers, building platforms that allow local, regional, and international action, all the while protecting the interests of each of the stakeholders in this Technopolis approach. So, Dr. Sharif, it's a complex problem, but I think beginning to put in place these types of systems to deal with the system of systems is an excellent step.
Excellent. Mr. David Smith, definitely your corporate solution, IBOT, can be helpful for develop different organizational system and solve all of the complex problems. Mr. Ron, my next question for you, this is the last round of the discussion, then I go for the framework of our Center of Excellence, and then go for closing remarks. So what innovative approach can help humanity anticipate and adapt to future climate risks? rather than reacting after disaster occurs? What's your thought?
Run that by me again. I didn't quite follow. Please.
Yeah, what innovative approaches can help humanity anticipate it and adapt to future climate risk rather than reacting after disaster occurs?
Right. Well, the underlying approach that I have learned to be effective over the course of time is the design process, which has been canonized, you might say, or formulated by the D School at Stanford University. Much of our systems, like David Smith was just mentioning, has to do with how businesses frame the world. They talk about ROI, and enlightened businesses talk about a circular economy. A design approach means that we delve into the problem on a broad and, again, using your term, systems approach. That means that once I establish a goal, I go through an iterative process to reach a viable solution based on the inputs from all sorts of folks. I made a point to a grad student I'm dealing with just yesterday. The question is, what does an engineer do, and how does an engineer go about things? And I said that, we talk about freedom in a very broad sense. When you bring it to engineers, we're talking about degrees of freedom. That's the term that's often used. And what comes up in raising that question is, what are the constraints? What are the boundaries? Well, here I am inside a little frame on your screen, so I can say there's a boundary here, there's a boundary here. Without moving the camera, what I have to say and express must be confined within this. So if I'm exploring the issues of climate and I wander off this direction, and then I freeze on something, I say, okay, this is obviously the way to go. I'm denying myself the opportunity to push the other boundaries to find out what all the parameters are that we're facing. So coming back to what just to use as an illustration, what I was talking about earlier, when I look at the ocean, of course, it doesn't occur to me that I'm only looking at the very surface. But in my mind, if I go out and walk into the water, I mean, it's so deep and it's so vast, I think that everything gets stirred up. If something comes into the ocean that doesn't belong there, it's so ginormous that nothing will come of that. There'll be no adverse consequences. But it turns out that the ocean doesn't work like that. It has this surface layer, as I mentioned. And if I, as an engineer, am designing a solution, assuming that that whole water column is all the same, I'm missing out completely on the fact that this particular microscopic layer is where the food chain starts. So that, just by way of example, is coming back to your question, the opportunity we have now, if we're creating a center of excellence, and you're saying, how do we approach the problem? It must be within a design framework. Bucky Fuller and other people have said, how do I predict the future best? I predict the future by designing the future. That gives me at least the role of agency, as opposed to having it happen to me. If I want to make it happen, I have to design a better world for myself and for my peers, for all of you in this meeting, not by just, starting off blindly without taking into account all the variables that factor into getting a good outcome over an iterative, over and over and over again process.
Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what's your closing remarks for today?
Yeah, Actually, in the meeting, everything was very amazing. All the speakers are so good, so very good. But I just wanted to tell you that I wanted to add a dimension to the whole thing. That is the concept of women. While gender neutrality is a concept which has to be there amongst the people, but what feminists say, that women as leaders have to be promoted in this particular area. So I mean, for example, women of Orissa have lately agitated militarily against mining projects. So women, because they belong to the house, they are the ones who are in charge of everything. They should, all the eco-feminists would say, like Vandana Shiva and all these people, amazing work they have done in this particular field. And so we need to have we need to have a policy making in the terms that it becomes more focused on women, and women should come to the forefront worldwide. So this is a concept which is developing in India past maybe 20-25 years, and now it is majorly being promoted even by the government of India, that women should come forward. And I mean, women can do amazing work. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a long discussion, so I want to take another 7-8 minutes to share our framework. Why I'm choose this climate-related initiative and for Center of Excellence for today's discussions. We have our all famous speakers from South Asia, from Global North, Mr. Rob Enderle, Madam Ali Rice, Dr. Tamanna, Dr. Srini, Mr. Ron Swinson, Mr. David Smith and his company iBeyond, Mr. Shankar, all of you are part of our World Talent Economic Forum institutions, and your contribution as a fellow actually give us a lot of abilities, and by this way we can solve all of the complex problem and we can bring all of the solution for the society. So as I am from Bangladesh, I born in a very small place. So I believe that climate change is real. I know there are a lot of debate and all of the things, but I want to define it's not climate change. This is the time climate actually collapse. So in that situation, we need emergency actions from around the world. That's why we developed the Center of Excellence. And quickly it becoming very severe. It causes mass disruptions and suffering. It is tied closely to problem of pandemic, migration, job loss. All of the things is happening not only in Bangladesh, around South Asia. What we needed response to our climate related issues, it include resilience, adaptations and mitigations. I think our speakers today, they discuss these political issues. Who can take these actions? If I go for this framework for the South Asia, we need political parties, we need education in institutions, we need social values, we need science and technologies, what we discussed today, and we need press or media to create awareness or building capacity of the people. So what is the obstacle? What I'm observing in global south, lack of awareness, outreach, denial. Uh, we do not have enough interested corporation who want to solve these things. There are a lot of misinformations and greenwashing. That's why we are organizing every week this dialogue, inability to decide on constructive actions and disdains for science. So we need more science and innovations, and we need more corporation who can solve this problem. So what we needed, through some will become organizational leader, they will start by leading change. We need good leaders who can change our society. They need not be climate scientists. I do not want to say that everyone need to be scientists, but they must be comfortable with technology. Technology is the most important factor for us, and we have all of the technologies solution provider like Solar Skyway, like iBeyond, and all of the companies. So from Tando and World Talent Economic Forum institutions, Big Heart Technologies, California Institute of Management, we are trying to develop 1,000 climate leaders by 2030. It's very focused. I know that South Asia has billions of people, but overnight we cannot change. We can develop 1,000 leaders. So what we will practice through our Center of Excellence, we go for system thinking. I think today's our speakers discuss about system thinking because climate is bound to other problem. We need more critical thinkings to cut through misinformation and greenwashing. We need negotiation and persuasions because we need to pursue and negotiate for our funding, for our technology with the global north. But I'm very much happy there are many good uh, global north leaders already join in our ecosystem. So we need to move reluctance organizations to action. Technology assessment, I think Dr. Srini already discussed this particular point. We need to help fit beneficial climate tech to the local needs. We have to go for urban and bi-regional climate resilience and more activities. Policy is definitely most important factor. For that particular issues, I request all of the South Asian NGOs, corporations, government agencies, please collaborate with us. We need your help, and we need member from around this global from these communities. So we will provide certificates programs with industry and academia relationship through Tando. AI is a very important factor. With Kokoro, we develop Wisdom app because global north and global south wisdom is very important to solve all of the complex problems. iBeyond has all of the interesting aspects which will be helpful for the decision making through machine learning and all of the things. Uh, like Swinson family with their seek urban planning, with Gaiapoli strategy, we can solve many complex problems. So what we can do, technology and ideology jointly create change. Innovation began in metropolitan area and its beneficiary can be the local communities, and definitely we need a global network. So definitely I want to give special thanks to Tando. It's a think and do tanks who always help us to solve all of the complex problem. We have 100 fellows from around the world. We do focus on biotechnology, cancer, communication network, complex system dynamics, energy industry, health economics, logistics, manufacturing, material engineering, nanotechnology, nuclear engineering, orbital mechanics, public health, robotics, science and technology policy, semiconductor, thermal issues, and innovation policy, which is very, very important for global South. We have some Nobel Prize winner, Mr. Finn. He win Nobel Prize in economics. We also have Mr. Ilya, who win Nobel Prize in chemistry. Bill Coppers, he also win Newman models. Bills, also a very famous peoples from Tando. They join in our ecosystem. Professor Fred regularly join in our ecosystem. Julian Grosser also join in our ecosystems. There are more famous people always help our ecosystem. We go for publishing lot of books. World Talent Economic Forum publish around 12 books, especially talent economy and global talent development is our strategic things. Artificial intelligence, agroeconomy, climate innovation is most important factors. Mr. Sharidan Tatsuno's Gaiapoli strategies is an excellent strategy what they are deploying in Texas Austin. Beside that, we have our world famous speakers from around the world, Mr. Adrian, uh, Dr. Talib from UNWTO, Mr. Rob Endaldi, Mr. Guterman from Thomas Guterman family, Mr. Ben from Swiss Impact Investment, Mr. Home Stoner, he built small medium enterprise UN, I want to say, with Pacific Rim Business Councils, Mr. David Smith, Mr. Nick Palveda, Honorable David Walker, who run US economy last 10 years. Definitely IIT is a very important factor for us. Ron Swinson, Professor Buff, and Professor Fred is valuable for us. And for that particular issues, we developed CEO development program from World Talent Economic Forum. And recently we are publishing our scientific book, with modern science, engineering, and technology. Our book names Silk Road 3.0, which is focused on climate Silk Roads. It will be Silk Road 3.0, new innovations. All of the global north and global south can contribute for Asian pathway for innovations. And I want to give thanks those who join for today's session. This is actually very good initiative. I want to say how I get support from Mr. Shankar, how I get support from all of the speakers. Now I want to go for closing remarks. Dr. Srini, what's your closing remarks? This is our framework actually. Dr. Srini, can you unmute please?
Pretty exciting though. Very good to acknowledge, the world's stalwarts which you have showcased. We have a very rich talent across the board. I think we should certainly leverage this competency and see what best solutions we can build around the ecosystem. End of the day, I think one of our fellow panel member was talking about on solutions. I think that's a key point. That's a key takeaway. So if we can build some good solutions around which can quickly put the issues in place, I think that is where our focus would be. And again, thanks to bring me onto this platform. I'm personally happy and thankful to you, Dr. Sharif, and good to know about my fellow panels, about their work, what they have done, during the past years, contributed to the climate, and look forward for many more sessions like this. And maybe in the next sessions, we should certainly get the blueprint ready and showcase and the draft versions, and then take the feedbacks from some of our fellow colleagues and see how we can get this to the next level. I think there should be a value chain improvement step by step, and see how we can progress with a very good milestone program. Thank you once again to all of you, and thanks to Dr. Sharif. My special thanks to you, and
Thank
have
you.
a nice.
Thank you. Madam Alirais, what's your closing remarks?
So my closing remark actually comes from, I did some research last time I was on, which was a week ago, and I think if we actually looked at different perspectives, we did things differently. And what if the quickest path to repair our planet also created jobs, promoted fairness, and drove economic inclusion? But that success was seen differently. So so it wasn't about economy, but the ecology, and like improving the planet and our environment that we live in. So essentially, I think we need to come from a different standpoint, really. So and that's our measure needs to be different, and the way that we monitor things needs to be different, so that we're not constantly taking from the world, but kind of sustainably living the way of the way biodiversity works. So essentially, we're not taking too much, and that there's shared resources, and it kind of goes back to ownership, really. So that to really respect a community, you need to be part of it, and essentially you kind of share something, as opposed to living in a solitary kind of. So that we're all kind of part of the process and part of the.
Thank you. Thank you. For our CEO development program, Madam Alirais, Dr. Tamanna, Humaira Tanzila, they are helping our women leaders. Thank you for your excellent contribution for World Talent Economic Forum. Mr. Rob Endaldi, what's your closing remarks?
Yeah, so we talked about a lot of things. One of the things that I think we should probably discuss or mention in almost every show is the need for better critical thinking training in colleges and universities, because part of the issue here is we're dealing with an awful lot of false information in what is a very important topic for the survival of the planet. And if we can't get people to think more critically and become less easily manipulated, we're not going to get where we want to go. So I'll step back to the core. Our problem is us. And if we can make ourselves into better decision makers, if we can learn to use artificial intelligence in the way it needs to be used, as opposed to the way it's being abused, then I think we can make some very real changes to our trajectory and improve what is likely going to be otherwise a dire outcome. So that's where I would like to end it, is to continue to challenge folks to think critically, to challenge what you're being told, and make sure that you're well-founded in your beliefs, so that you're not making decisions that are doing yourself and the planet harm.
Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what's your closing remarks for today?
Yeah, so I just want to say that, the climate scientists, for example, have held that, humans have been responsible for the state of the world we are in right now. And I guess, it's an issue not just for humans, but also for animals, and so I guess we need to understand that, for example, the vegan movement, etc., the way they are trying to protect animals. So many of these things, climate affects animals. For example, when they have the plastic within themselves, they die. The cows, for example, so the protection of animals is a must. And till the time that doesn't happen, we do not live in a just world, because they are also a part of our ecosystem. So I guess we need to focus not just on human beings, which is obviously prime of prime importance, but also we need to take care of animals, below the ocean or above the ocean, and in the skies. And I guess we'll have a richer system. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ron, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I see our opportunity to be, each of us in our own way, taking responsibility for designing a better future. And that means, as I mentioned, understanding the constraints in which we operate. So the process of gradually going through this exercise, we learn what is our passion, and to the extent that you find something that you really know matters for you and for those around you, I say take that. And the way that Joseph Campbell said it is follow your bliss.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your closing remarks for today?
Dr. Sharif, thank you, first of all, for your leadership in helping put this together and beginning to go forward with it. As we look at how we negotiate the plant's future, it really demands that we have a collective, sustained commitment from all sectors of society, from the governments, from academia, from corporations, from communities, from individuals. And that sustained collective commitment is so necessary as we go forward, because we have to put a path forward by fostering cooperation, aligning national interests with global imperatives, and leveraging innovations in technology, in finance, in governance, and how we're going to do these things. You've heard me say, Rob reaffirmed it, that education is a key part of it. Most citizens, I believe, in most countries around the world don't feel like they have a part in solving climate change. And so that's part of the issue as we get there. But my biggest closing remark, and I'm going to go back to what I said last time, this is not a simple answer. It's to a problem. It's not even a problem that defining the problem is simple. There's so many elements in this that a pure systems approach isn't enough. You really have to go, as I said, to a systems approach, and to begin to define it, begin to put solutions in place, and particularly to implement. Because we can come up with solutions, but implementing them on a global basis is going to be part of the challenge. That is why the type of actions you're beginning to take, Dr. Sharif, with your teams and others are so vitally critical for this. And we need to pull together a group of leaders across the entire Technopolis to be able to apply it and to a framework, into a platform, into a platform of platforms that can meet these needs. So, Dr. Sharif, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of it today.
Thank you. Mr. Shankar, what's your closing remarks for today? Can you unmute, please, Mr. Shankar?
I have to run. I'll see you guys all later. Have a great weekend.
Mr. Shankar, what's your closing remarks?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Dr. Sharif and Dr. Srini and the rest of the dignitaries here today, because it's pretty historic, as I see. It's really, when you say Tando, it is think and do, which is quite phenomenal, because we all can align. One of the things that I always believe, that leadership should align, though we might come from different disciplines and different standpoints. This thing called think and do has never happened, I think, because the science of AI, the way the future is looking at with technology and humans coming together to solve a common problem, is something which is very unique by itself. And it requires certain leadership, like the politics, finance, and the youth and everybody coming together. So it's like a lab, which we try to establish in India, and see how all and everything can come together and take on that secret sauce, as Dr. Sharif talks about, and how we can bring it, localize it, and put it all together with a human heart. You have a mindset, you need a heart set to go beyond all that we have already done, and we need to all come together, because this is something we're standing in front of, and we need to come together. And I'm so glad that Dr. Srini has come today, and I see another great support, and we can take it on from there. And like you said about the playbook, we can actually escalate these programs to bring more and more inputs, integrating all of that, and through our collective intelligence, we can see a brighter future, starting from India and co-creating with other organizations around the world and other countries. The WTF is a grand platform. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharif, and everybody else today here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you all of your excellent contributions, and thank you for all of your support. World Talent Economic Forum, we believe in excellence. If we have excellence teammates and we have excellence contributions, all of the good things may happen. And maybe we can develop our next Harvard, next Stanford, or next MIT through our Center of Excellence, with all of your industry and academic contributions. Thank you, Mr. Ron. Thank you, Mr. David Smith. Thank you, Mr. Shankar, Madam Alirvais, Dr. Srini. I think it's too late for you. Dr. Tamanna, for your excellent support for World Talent Economic Forum. Let's make more progress with our Center of Excellence in South Asia. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.